really the farm, that sort of boundary of the farm is now the world sort of thing. And we need to remember, especially when it comes to poultry, we in large part are taking what would be low value, in a lot of co-products and things like that, and we're upcycling it into high value protein product. So in that context, we really should be thinking that, instead of this modular thinking, whereas, here's a poultry farm and here's a whatever, really what we're doing is a value added activity within the crop sector.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Poultry Podcast. My name is Jason Emmert, and our guest today is Matt Oryschak, who is currently pursuing a PhD in poultry nutrition at the University of Alberta in Edmonton. Matt previously worked for 12 years as a research associate for the Alberta Agriculture and Forestry Division of the Alberta government, and also previously worked as an environmental program specialist and livestock production instructor. In his current PhD program, Matt is focused on addressing technical issues associated with expanded use of fava beans as a feedstuff for layers and broilers. He also has a strong interest in dietary strategies to reduce the environmental footprint of poultry production. Welcome to the podcast, Matt. We're excited to visit with you.
Great to be here. Thanks for the invitation, Jason. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, well, we sure appreciate you spending some time with us. And oftentimes we like to hear about people's academic journey, but you've got some great experience before returning to academia. So anything you'd like to share about that journey, we'd love to hear it.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I did. I'm a city kid, born and bred. It didn't come from a farm background, but was always drawn to agriculture. I liked animals and spent a little bit of time on, farms belonging to extended family. And so for my bachelor's degree, I went out to the University of British Columbia in Vancouver, Canada, and I did my bachelor's degree there. It was there that I kind of met a couple of people that were very influential in steering me into animal nutrition. One of them was Dr. Robert Blair, who is in Western Canada is very well known, particularly in swine circles. And he was a very important mentor. And after that, he encouraged me, and I went to the University of Saskatchewan in Saskatoon. And worked at the Prairie Swine Center under Dr. Ruud Zylstra. Did my master's degree looking at the effect of particle size and enzymes on reducing nitrogen and phosphorus excretion from pigs. That was still in the day when we were still kind of feeling out phytase and some of these other things, so especially in a Western Canadian context. And also came into contact with Dr. John Patience, who I think is a host of one of your sister podcasts here. John is a great guy, and he was a great mentor and learned a lot. I then, my first job out of school was actually teaching in a 2-year vocational agriculture program at a place called Fairview College. Fairview is about 5 hours north of Edmonton here, so it's about as far north as we do agriculture. There is agriculture all the way up to the Northwest Territories, but that's kind of the central area there. And the one thing that I took away from that experience is when you have to teach somebody, sometimes you realize your own deficiencies in knowledge, and you're literally learning about 2 steps ahead of the people that you then have to teach. And it's I believe it's the Richard Feynman principle that if you can't explain it to a 4th grader or something, you don't understand it well enough. So that's always been my guiding light whenever it comes to extension as well. If you can't explain it in certain terms, you don't understand it well enough. So yeah, so after that, I did that for 2 years, and then I moved to the government, as you said, and spent about 4 years doing manure management, nutrient management extension as part of a team. I was the only animal scientist. Everybody else, there were these agronomists and soil scientists, and they kind of looked at me sideways because what do animal nutritionists know about nutrient management? But we all got along well, and everybody really played an important role. And I learned so much from them that helped me really understand holistically sort of where livestock fit into the big picture of our agricultural systems. And and then after I left government for a short period and came back, and then, as you said, for 12 years I worked as a feed associate with the Monogastric Feed Research Group. It was led by Dr. Eduardo Beltranena. Again, probably better known to pig folks, but he entrusted to me the poultry research component or stream of research, and did some stuff. Have looked at a lot of feedstuffs, different feedstuffs that we produce here. And then also, I have always had an interest in understanding the connection between animal nutrition and environmental footprint. And so I'm very fortunate to be able to have a little bit of freedom within the context of our program to look at that. So that's how, and then what led me into my PhD after being away from academia for 20 years is the realization I love research, but you kind of hit a ceiling if in terms of funders and whatever, if you are trying to do that with a master's degree. So at the same time, the government was in the process of, they were getting out of the business of having in-house researchers as provincial employees. So it was at that point that Doug Corver, who's a friend and mentor, longtime mentor, he said, you're welcome to come here. And so I've been here at the University of Alberta for the last 3 years. Well, 2021. So I'm into my third year.
Sure.
One of the things that I would say, just in terms of the circuitous route that I've taken, is I find it is a completely different ballgame when you've spent time out working in industry, in agriculture, and then you come back into academia. You have a very different perspective than if you've just gone straight from, bachelor's, master's, PhD. It helps you understand a little bit of the importance of the so what of your research and being able to explain that to a general audience. So that's the long-winded story.
Yeah. Absolutely. But I think that's encouraging to anybody who's out there and is in career and maybe even feeling like mid-career, but just wondering if is it possible to change directions and go back and learn some different things and pursue something different?
It is, because life experience, it gives you certain gifts that you cannot get through a traditional education. Life is the greatest teacher, I think. Mm-hmm. I had my biggest concern coming back into the program, into a program, was not necessarily the research component, because I had been doing that. But it was actually, could I sit through 3 hours of lecture a week? Yeah. Because I think all of us, as we get older, you become somewhat autodidactic. You when you need information, you go find it. You seek out the information that you need. So the idea of sitting, having to be in a lecture at a particular time and, assignments and whatever, that was really, I think, what I was worried most about. But, you fall into the routine and you do it and you get the work done. So, I would really encourage anybody out there, if you are, sort of advanced in your career, don't be afraid of thinking about going back to school, because you will find it, if you had a really rough experience, in your master's degree, and believe me, it's a common experience. Everybody has kind of a rough ride because your expectations sometimes don't match up with what the reality is. But believe me that after spending some time out in the world and, seeing things, you have a lot of skills and abilities that you don't really realize until you're dropped into the situation. So yeah, absolutely. So be open to it. Yeah.
Eastman serves veterinarians and nutritionists in agrochemical and animal health industries by helping them select, evaluate, and implement innovative nutritional programs. Eastman works with your team to customize your gut health approach in feed and water. Eastman's approach addresses nutritional and bacterial challenges and finds new ingredient preservation and hygiene solutions. Explore ways to accelerate and innovate your programs. Contact the Animal Nutrition Team at eastman.com.
Well, I'm so glad you shared that part, because that's hearing from people who have gone down that path is so valuable. Yeah. Well, great. Well, let's now kind of shift gears, and we'll think about your current project, what you're working on right now, which I think is with fava beans. And so, give us kind of what's the genesis of that project? What's leading you into that line of research?
Sure. Yeah, sure. So, here in Canada, and particularly in Western Canada, even though we have, like, at last count, I think I counted 50 different agricultural commodities, feedstuffs that we produce here in Western Canada, poultry production still relies heavily on soybean meal, as that's what everybody likes to use. Of course, we don't. That's one of the commodities we don't produce here at all. So most of that is imported, and so we are kind of at the mercy of global prices, exchange rates, things like that. Yeah. Now, at the same time, if you're a crop producer in Western Canada, the secret sauce in terms of a crop rotation is typically you want to have a grain, and maybe there's 2 grain crops in a 4-year rotation. You want an oil seed, because oil seed, usually that's your money maker. And then you want a pulse crop as well, because that helps to sort of rebuild the nitrogen in the soil. It also, especially if there's a year where there's fertilizer prices are up, like we've seen the last little while because of global events, you can kind of, there's an option. It really helps. And also the oil seed, especially here in Western Canada, is canola. And canola, almost on its own, has been responsible for a rebuilding of soil organic content in Western Canada. So it's not just for economic reasons, it's also for soil health reasons. Sure. Now, the problem is the dominant pulse crops in Western Canada, peas is kind of one of the big ones, and there's also lentils, chickpeas. Here in Alberta, peas are usually king. But the problem is, if you live in an area that is prone to early frost, or you can't get out into the fields early in the spring, or you tend to have wet conditions, peas may not be the best option for you, just because peas like it dry. So where fava beans sort of come into it is they are somewhat more cold tolerant. They love wet conditions, and they're also, in terms of pulse crops, they're able to fix almost 100% of their nitrogen requirements. Wow. So yeah. Now, on top of that, from a feed standpoint, typically when you're talking about field peas, protein content is somewhere in the 23 to 27-ish percent protein range. Fava beans is 26 to 30. And because of that, there's a lot of interest from the plant-based protein trend that's going on right now to use fava as the base for producing, plant-based protein fractions and concentrates and things like that.
Right.
The problem, however, when it comes to fava beans is it doesn't really, there are very limited markets. So as opposed to peas where there is a really solid feed market, fava beans, there is very limited international markets. The main international market actually, from my understanding, is Egypt and a couple of the countries in the Middle East there. That market, however, is a bit crowded because we compete with the French, Australians, Italians, and also to an extent producers in the UK. So, and of course, our crop is usually the last one to come off in the year, so you're kind of Johnny-come-lately to the game. So as a result, the acreage of fava that we grow is very limited. And right now, a lot of it is being grown under contract, there is a lot of contract growing that's going on to supply plant-based protein producers, so protein people who are doing fractionation and things like that. So the problem is that there's stagnation in the acreage of fava bean. And as I mentioned, that has effects if you're a crop producer because it limits your options and rotation.
Right.
And at the same time, poultry producers really are looking for anything that they can find to help manage feed costs. Mm-hmm. So really where the catalyst for this project is we're trying to resolve a lot of the basic technical issues that we need to understand in order to facilitate expanded use of fava beans for poultry production.
Right.
The idea being, if we come out of this project and we can demonstrate the utility of fava beans and where they fit in to poultry rations, then we can maybe start developing a bit of a domestic market, like a sustainable demand for fava beans, which would allow expansion of fava bean acreage. One of the things, and I think a lot of people who sort of operate in the, if you do any sort of crop processing, you really need to have that livestock market, feed market, to be able to sustain acreage or grow acreage, because there's always going to be a proportion of your tonnage that you grow every year that isn't going to be usable for human food or even bioindustrial stuff. So what are you going to do with it? Yeah. That's kind of it's key to have that issue figured out before you start getting into some novel crop production, because if you don't figure out where your marketing streams are, it really limits the economic viability of growing a particular crop. So canola is a good example. I mean, if we weren't able to sell all of our canola meal that comes out of the canola crushing into the dairy industry, that's a major revenue stream that would really limit the economic value of canola. But we have that. So, and that's really what we're trying to do. We're trying to develop that salvage market, that feed market for fava growers, for the mutual benefit of poultry producers and fava producers. So that's kind of that's kind of the crux of the project. Yeah.
I love the aspect of the market analysis and really thinking about it from production and what is the overall market like and who are you competing with on a worldwide scale. It's a level of understanding that I think sometimes is hard to impart to our graduate students, particularly if they're going straight through school. If they don't have that practical experience, sometimes it's hard to grasp that. So I really appreciate that background. Yeah. Now, when we think about fava, are we thinking about some of the same kinds of anti-nutritional factors? Are there similar challenges, do we know, with the use of fava for poultry?
Okay, so there are some that are similar and some that are unique to fava. So, for example, oligosaccharides, we know that, like most pulses, there's oligosaccharides in there. Right. We're not sure to what extent those are really problematic, but like peas and also soy itself has oligosaccharides that we deal with. So, that's one aspect. Another one is tannins. So there's there's been sort of an open question as to how problematic tannins in fava bean are. One of the things we know about tannins in fava bean is they're pretty much concentrated in the hull. So if you wanted to go to the extent of dehulling them, but right now we're sort of at early days, because you would have to demonstrate, is there an economic benefit or a nutritional benefit to dehulling?
Right.
So that's an open question, and it's one of the questions that we're going to look at in our studies. Is just, is it really worth dehulling if you're dealing with a high tannin variety? Or, maybe we should only be focusing on tannin-free or low tannin variety. So that's an open question.
Oh, very good. Yeah.
So oligosaccharides is one. Phytic acid, of course, there's phytic acid in there as well. So that's kind of par for the course for plant-based ingredients. The one that's kind of unique, though, to fava bean is visine and convisine. Now, I won't get into a whole detailed discussion of this, but essentially what visine and convisine do is when they're metabolized in the digestive tract and they're absorbed, it increases the oxidative load. So it increases oxidative stress in the animal. You get more free radicals. It taxes the intrinsic antioxidant systems in the birds. And there's some conflicting information out there as to whether at practical inclusion levels, whether the levels that we see in fava beans, whether they're problematic. Now, the good news is that plant breeders have figured out they know how to screen for that trait now, and so probably over the next 10 years, visine, convisine will be eliminated. But in the interim, because we don't want to wait for 10 years for people to finally think about, fava beans as a feedstuff, we know that in humans with a certain genetic defect, I guess, that limits their body's ability to recycle glutathione, and as a result, they're more susceptible to oxidative stress. When they ingest fava beans in particular that have visine, convisine, it can actually result in a fatal condition called favism. So basically, they just die of oxidative stress. They're just not able to replenish the glutathione, and it can be fatal. Now, in the context of poultry, when you look at a chicken, you're like, oh, it's a chicken. But but I'm reminded of a T-shirt that a friend of mine had, that says, it may look like I'm not doing anything, but at the metabolic level, I'm really busy. And that's really, when you look at chickens, modern strains of poultry, they may look like, just a chicken, but metabolically, they're marathon runners. They are athletes, and there's a lot going on. And it's an open question that, again, we're going to look at in our studies here. Do the levels of visine and convisine that we see in Western Canadian fava beans currently, are they going to move the birds above that threshold where they start manifesting, reductions in performance because they're just not able to keep up with that the oxidative load? We don't know that. And so that is going to be one of the components of our research project, is so looking at tannins and looking at visine, convisine, and trying to figure out, contextualize it in a poultry nutrition situation. So yeah.
Very good. And of course, with ingredients that are currently used and lots of research that's been done, you're poised to really understand, as you mentioned, what the questions are, what the most likely issues are, and you can really come at it in a very informed way, which is great.
Yes.
Yeah, very good. Now, I wanted to spend a little bit of time, because I know you have the interest on the environmental side as well, and not just interest, but experience, which is very valuable. And I suspect you're not coming at it from the angle of all agriculture is bad. And so kind of, if you could, just take us through kind of your perspective on where animal agriculture fits into things and maybe directions we might need to go in the future.
Yeah, sure. That is a great question. So one of the things that I think is unfortunately, there is a prevailing view in society that when it comes to environment, you're guilty until proven innocent. And I think that animal agriculture in particular is a victim of that sort of worldview, I guess. Yeah. And, you have to start at the very, I think whenever you're looking at environmental impact of human activity, the first question you have to ask is, well, what is the value of that activity to society?
Right.
Well, we're feeding people, and we're doing it really well because, I mean, here in North America, we're able to feed not just our own population, but people around the world with about somewhere between 2 to 3% of the population doing all the heavy lifting, right? Yeah. So I think we need to really just step back a little bit and realize that all of the other activity that we do in society, people, doing science and getting educated and doing all of these other activities is only possible because we have gotten so good at producing food that we don't need as many people doing it. So, of course, that allows people to pursue other interests and whatever. So that's the first thing, is we really just need to realize that. And just to go back to this idea of guilty till proven innocent, early in my career, one of the things that I was a part of was here in Alberta, we had, there was a process called the Alberta Farm Plan. And what it was, I think it was deployed nationwide here, but each province it looked a little bit different. And what it was is it was a user-friendly risk assessment that you would go out and do with producers, and it would walk them through it. It broke it down, how are you storing your fertilizer, whatever. It was a very user-friendly risk assessment process. And initially, producers were a little bit, hey, come do this, and one of the things that was done was in order to get access to some of these funding programs to make improvements, you had to go through the farm plan process. So there's some people came into it from that, but for a lot of people, it was, they had some reservations, probably the same reservations that I have when my wife tells me you need to go to the doctor. And I'm like, I don't, I'm only going to get bad news if I go to the doctor.
That's right.
And so, there is this sort of, self-consciousness among producers that they're only going to hear bad things. You're only going to be told about, what you're not doing well. But what I really liked about the way the program was run is it was actually quite affirming for the producers, because they would go through this binder and they would realize, oh, I've only got like 3 or 4 things that really I need to improve on. I'm actually doing everything really, really well. And a lot of producers who went through the process, they're like, oh yeah, I am doing a good job. I don't need to, have my, my perception of the job I'm doing should not be shaped by, people out there telling me I'm a terrible, an environmental villain, because I'm actually doing a really good job. Now, the missing piece, I think, is we don't tell that story to the public of what farmers are actually doing to provide assurance to the public that they're doing the right thing. And, on the other side, and maybe this is something that I would target more towards people working in agriculture and in animal science especially. The trend in North America has been away from mixed farms in general to specializing in a particular commodity, right? I mean, even, if you ask somebody, well, are you, what kind of farmer are you? Oh, I'm a pig farmer, or I'm a, whatever, even though they do probably have some crops or whatever. And you can kind of be led into the mode of thinking that, pig production or poultry production or, whatever, it's something that happens in a vacuum, right? It happens, whereas, in the old days when you had mixed farms, you were usually using whatever you had on farm, and that was what it went into. What went into your, you threw it out to your chickens, or, used to feed the pigs. Well, that's still happening. And if you think about it, it's now happening at a regional level, and it's happening even at a global level, because we've got so good at moving, corn and soy that's being grown in the Midwest is going to the Netherlands, it's going to Africa, it's going to Asia, and it's coming to Canada for sure. So really the farm, that sort of boundary of the farm is now the world sort of thing. And we need to remember, especially when it comes to poultry, we in large part are taking what would be low value in a lot of co-products and things like that, and we're upcycling it into high value protein product. So in that context, we really should be thinking that, instead of this modular thinking, whereas, here's a poultry farm and here's a whatever, really what we're doing is a value added activity within the crop sector. I mean, that's really what, that is the agro-ecological niche of monogastric farming, whether it's pigs or ducks or chickens or whatever. We are basically a subsidiary that uses those non-human grade residues from crop production, the ones that are edible anyhow, and producing high value protein from it. So, that's really what we need to remember. So like I said, just to recap, farmers are doing a good job. Really, if the public knew just how much time and energy and mental strain there is managing the environment on their farm, I think people would change their mindset. We need to get away from this idea that farmers are guilty till proven innocent. That's not the way that we work around here. It's, and for, just remembering where livestock production falls into the big picture with agriculture, we are doing a major service. We are feeding people. And how do you put a price on that? How do you weigh, everything in life is a trade-off. I don't believe that you can have solutions that don't involve some sort of a trade-off with something. So if we're going to feed everybody, there's some externalities that go with that, both positive and negative, and we need to weigh those equally. And also don't exaggerate the scale of the problem as well. I mean, that's the other thing too. The media, I think sometimes they like to exaggerate the scale of problems because it's more attention, right? But
that's right.
Nobody talks about the 99% of the time that everything is going exactly the way it should. So
that's right.
And producers should not be ashamed of going out and telling their story and being proud of what they do.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate that perspective. And you used a word, upcycling, and it took me decades to realize this, but that is a concept that I'm finding is really resonating with my students who aren't from agricultural backgrounds, but they're looking at this and they're saying, okay, if we're not using some of these products within animal agriculture, where are those products going to go? And what's it going to do to the economies of using the other things that we get from that commodity? And that's, I don't know if it's a magic bullet, but it's certainly a concept that I've found I'm able to make some progress with their understanding of where animal agriculture fits.
Yeah, and really like all of animal agriculture, because I mean, what poultry production is doing on the sort of the grain and co-product side, ruminants are doing with low value land. They're able, like, it's a miracle. They're producing high quality protein from land that has no other real value. I mean, it's I shouldn't say no real value, but I mean, here in Western Canada, I mean, for decades in British Columbia, most of their cattle production happened. They would run the cattle up the hills into the timber, and that's where they would spend the grazing season. Yeah. And not only were they making milk and beef, they were also in turn managing the wildfire risk as well, because they were keeping the vegetation down. So yeah, I mean, I think we don't focus enough on the ecological goods and services that are provided by livestock production. And I think that really needs to be part of the story that we as animal scientists are out there telling.
Yep, absolutely. Oh, great.
It's time for our famous 3. When it comes to raising healthy animals, you need more than the right solutions. You need the right partner who brings decades of industry expertise and a global team to put that knowledge to work for the advancement of your operation. At Phibro Animal Health Corporation, we are proud to work with you as your trusted partner.
Well, I don't want to take too much advantage of your time, but we have these questions that we like to ask as we begin to wrap up. And boy, before I forget to say it, I'd sure love to visit again sometime, because I feel like we've just scratched the surface on some of the conversation. But as we get closer to the end of our time together, first question: what is your favorite poultry-related book or resource? And I'm not going to hold you to a book, and I'm not even going to hold you to one, but if you have any examples, yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, so I'm wise to this, because I've seen on other podcasts this question gets answered. So I came prepared today to answer that. So I'm going to give you 2 actually suggestions for this one. The first is for anybody out there who is in a graduate program, where you're expected to do any kind of stats or whatever. Stats is kind of like, it's that necessary evil for being a scientist. And there's some people that, they just, there's that sometimes you're lucky enough to have a biostatistician in the department, and you just go to them and say, tell me what I need to do or whatever. But if you are looking for a resource that I have found invaluable for understanding, like actually understanding statistics and using it in my research. This is an older edition of a book. So it's Biostatistics for Animal Science by Capps and Lambert. This is the first edition. There's a newer one that has a green cover. But if you are planning on spending any amount of time in research, and, I know everybody nowadays, books are expensive or whatever. And this is one resource that you should have on hand if you're ever going to do. And the lovely thing about it is, I'm doing a real good sales job here. I should get a cut of this. But one of the things I really like about this is if you use SAS as your statistical program, and I know right now there's other programs like R and SPSS and whatever people are using, this actually has coding examples in it for SAS.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So it's really, really good. Especially if you're not a coder. I'm not a coder, but it gives you enough that you can be dangerous. So that's number one.
Yeah.
For people, though, who are just like poultry, and you're looking for a really good poultry resource, one of the challenges we've had in our research group, of course, is, there's turnover in technicians and personnel, and you need to make sure that you're getting everybody up to speed if you're putting them in charge of poultry. And the books that I really we have a couple of them are the Signals books.
Yeah.
From I think they're Wageningen puts them out, but there's layer signals, broiler signals. There's a general poultry signals. It's a really good layman's. It explains a lot of the really important information in there, because, you get a brand new technician who's this eager, whatever, but you tell them, I want you to go check crop fill. Well, what's that mean?
What is that?
What is that? And it's really good if you're considering, getting out and working in the poultry industry or working with poultry producers. Going through these, it's invaluable, because it helps you to be able to connect at a industry literacy. That's one of the things that I find a lot of students struggle with is being able to communicate in the the vernacular and the conceptual framework that producers are working in. And so these books are a really good entry point for people who maybe don't have that much exposure to poultry, and they're really accessible in terms of the way that they cover the topics. So yeah, those would be my recommendations. So
yeah, those are fantastic. Very good. Yeah, thank you. All right. Well, the second question, very similar, except we take the poultry off, and and these can be other professional things, but certainly they can be fun as well.
Okay. So Jason, have you ever tried to take on a new habit or break a bad one that you have?
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Every January, right?
Pretty regular schedule. Yep.
Yeah. So, especially if you have, if you're married, you get pointed out all of the bad habits that you have, or you become cognizant of the fact that there's things that you could really do better to be more effective. And this past summer, I was given a copy of this book, and I would strongly recommend it. It's a fairly well-known book. I think it's called Atomic Habits. Yeah. One of the things that I really appreciate about the book is it helps you understand the psychology of new habits and whatever, and how you can actually train yourself to get out of bad habits or patterns that you're in and adopt ones that, you can, and I have actually, believe it or not, I'm a believer because I've actually been able to pick up a couple of good habits as a result. And if I can, just the one key thing that I took away from this book that I think is really valuable if you're a student or you're somebody who's striving towards, a particular goal. One of the things that they talk about is, like, let's say, for example, a scholarship, right? You're interested in getting a scholarship. Well, the mistake a lot of people make is the goal that they set for themselves is, I want the scholarship. And so what they do is they try and figure out a way, well, how do I get to the scholarship? But what the book actually says is you need to change the system that you're operating within. So in other words, that's not the goal. The scholarship isn't the goal, but it's to develop a system that would make you the kind of person that would be competitive for a scholarship.
Oh, yeah.
So, for me, that was a really valuable lesson that came out of the book, because all too often you see people who they'll achieve a goal and then they just feel empty, like they just lose motivation. It's kind of like, well, I did it. And so instead what it says is the goal is the system. It's not what comes to you through adopting those behaviors and attitudes and habits. The goal is actually adopting that system, and then good things come to you. And I think it's a brilliant takeaway, but it's a very digestible read, and it actually has links to a website that have resources that you can download. So great.
Perfect. Oh, very good. Yeah, that reminds me, I have a freshman class, and we have them put together an 8-semester plan. So they can graduate when they're seniors. And I told them, I said, I really don't care about the outcome on this assignment. What I want you to learn is the process of putting together the plans, because your classes are going to change. It's okay. It's a process. Yeah.
And that's a perfect, like, anybody who's ever been in high level athletics, if you listen to the coaches, they'll talk about you need to adopt the system. It's all about the system, and you may not get the result you want right away, but as long as you believe in the system and everybody's following the system, eventually you get the results you want. So
that's great.
lots of applicability. Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, well, the last question then, and we kind of started with this because your journey through work and academia, you had some great advice at that time. But I'll just extend that again. If you were talking to somebody, and maybe if it's a student or maybe it's a professional wanting to either change careers or get into the poultry industry, any other advice that you would have?
Boy, that's a good question. Well, the first thing is, a lot of us, when you go through sort of, regimented educational system like university, you can fall into a mindset where, well, that's the only way you learn is you have to go, and I think one of the things you need to cultivate is, what does your informal learning look like? Like, where do you go and get information and whatever? And in particular, if you don't have a lot of experience with something, ask. Like one of the things that I find is frustrating, and there's sometimes, especially I find with students, they because over the last 12 years or whatever, I've had a lot of interaction with students, and in the deep dark recesses of, when they're just among themselves, like, I really wish I knew how to do that, but I don't want to ask so-and-so because then I look vulnerable. Right. And what you have to, what students need to understand is there are so many people out there that are willing to stop and take time.
Yes.
And spend time with you answering a question that you have or helping build your capacity to do something. I mean, especially professors. I mean, a lot of people, they look at professors sometimes as these marble statues that, they're unapproachable. But I can tell you, there is so much to be learned in informal mentorship and whatever, and just ask. If you know somebody knows how to do something and they do it well, I find a lot of people that are very competent at particular things are the most willing teachers because they love to share. There's an old. My wife is fond of reminding me, you'll never be good at anything that you don't like. But I find that people who are really competent with particular things, they don't get annoyed with people coming up and asking, how do I do it? But at the same time, the bargain that you strike with somebody is they're going to share with you your expertise. You need to come to them with humility and just admit what you don't know. And you need to be patient and you don't waste their time. That's the big thing. Because I've had students in the past who've said, well, I'd really like to, learn how to do this. And, and I'll say, well, there's an opportunity you can learn at this time. And then they ghost you. They don't show up. And that really can sometimes sour people on wanting to help, or they're a little bit more, they may apply some more sort of tests to, but really, right. If you're a student, or even if you're not a student, if you're older, if you know that there's somebody who, and if you don't know who might know something about something you're interested in, ask. And
absolutely.
There's so many people I know that they're willing to share what they know. As long as you respect their time and you approach with humility, they're willing to invest in you. So don't be afraid about asking questions. Don't be afraid of saying, I don't know. And, there's just be humble, and you're amazed at what you can get people to show you.
Yeah. Oh, fantastic advice. Yeah. And Matt Oryschak, you've been a great example of what you were just talking about, willing to share your time with us and give some great advice. And we sure appreciate your perspective. And hopefully we get a chance to have another conversation soon.
I would love to, Jason. You know where I am, so just holler and we'll set something up.
Sounds wonderful. Well, thank you again, and thank you to everyone out there listening. We hope everybody has a great day. Until we talk to you again, take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.